All right, we are going to do a short review on using your graphing calculator to find relative maximums and minimums and also zeros. When we look at a relative maximum, we are looking at a value where your graph changes from increasing to decreasing. So it's basically a turning point. When we look at a relative minimum, it's the reverse. We're going from decreasing to increasing. Okay? But again, we are looking at those turns that our graph makes. They're called relative max and mins because they're not an absolute max. Our graph does get higher over here, and it's not a minimum. Our graph gets lower over here. But in this section, it is an important point where our graph is turning. Okay? The calculator steps. We first of all have to add our equation in under our y equals button. And then we want to make sure and set an appropriate window. If we're trying to find the max and mins, we want to make sure we see that point on our graph. So we may have to adjust our window. We're going to look at the graph, and then we would use second trace to find our max and mins. If we were looking for a minimum, we want to choose option 3. If we are looking for a maximum, we want to choose option 4. And then we will be using our left and right buttons to move our cursor to lock in where we want the calculator to look for those max and mins. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our first example here. So I'm in my y equals screen, and I need to type in my equation. So we had an x, our variable is right there. We need a power of 3. Then I need to move beyond that power position and add in the plus 4x squared minus 11x and minus 30. Okay? Now, right now my window's set from -10 to 10 for both x and y. And when I look at the graph of it, you'll notice that I'm not seeing those turning points. They're just a little off my screen. So I'm going to extend my y values, and I'm going to set this at -40 for a minimum for y, and I'm going to go up to a positive 30 for my y max. And I'm going to just take the tick marks out. It'll just be too cluttered to try to put 70 tick marks in that little space. All right, and now if we look at our graph, we can see those values nicely. Okay, then we are going to calculate a max and min. To do that, we do second and our trace button. And I'm going to start with a minimum, number 3. And it is important to just use your left and right arrows to move. And we want to set that cursor to the left of our turn. So I'm going to lock its place in by hitting enter there. And notice that there is a little arrow up at the top of the screen that says I've locked my cursor there. And now I'm going to move it around the turn. So past the turn, hit enter to lock that side in. And now the calculator is going to look between those two dotted lines and say, where is my lowest point? Then if I hit enter, it will actually do the calculation. So I am getting a minimum of about 1 and for an x coordinate and -36 for a y coordinate. So I'm going to say my relative minimum is the point, positive 1, -36. Sometimes that is written as a minimum of -36 at the x value of 1. So both options are fine. All right, now I need to go back and find a maximum. So I'm going to do second trace again. This time I'm going to choose option 4, which is maximum. And I'm going to use my left arrow to move that cursor beyond the turn. I always have to lock in the left side first. Hit enter. Move it around the turn. Hit enter again. And then hit enter a third time to get the calculation. All right? And so we have a relative maximum of -3.67, and we're going to go out to the hundredths place, just round to the nearest hundredth, and then the y coordinate would be 14.81. Okay? Our next topic is to look at how we find zeros, and it's very, very similar. You'll notice that on the steps, the only difference is what I've underlined here in blue, that we're going to choose option 2, which is calculating a 0. Okay? So I have a new equation, and notice that we have a 0 here. Okay? When we enter it on the calculator, we're still going to put it in as y equals. It's just that we are going to let the calculator figure out when y is 0. Okay? So let's go back to our calculator, go back to our y equals screen, and I'm going to alter my equation. I need a negative 2x squared, and I need a negative 3x, and a positive 7. So if you have extra digits, you will have to delete those little pieces. All right, now I'm going to do a zoom 6. Zoom 6 resets the window to that negative 10 to positive 10 in both directions for x and y. So that's an easy way to restart it, and then if I have to adjust it, I can. But looking at this picture, it's telling me to find the zeros. It's a typical x cubed graph, and it is only crossing the x-axis in one spot. So looks like a good window. I'm seeing what I need to see. I'm going to do second trace. This time I'm choosing a number 2, finding a 0. Now I have to always lock in the left side first. So based on the way the slant of that portion of my graph, to the left of the x-intercept would be underneath. I'm going to lock that cursor in, and then I'm going to move just above or to the right of where it crosses the x-axis, hit enter again. Notice I have 2 vertical lines on my calculator. It's going to look between those 2 to find where it crosses the x-axis. All right, hit enter a third time, and it looks like my 0 is at negative 1.81 if we round it. Take a look at the y-coordinate for a second. Sometimes your calculator will show this. It's in scientific notation. If we have negative 1.7 e negative 12, that means negative 1.7 times 10 to the negative 12th, which means our decimal is really 12 spaces to the left of what you're seeing. So that is an extremely small number. It's basically a 0. So I would say I have a 0 when x is equal to negative 1.81. All right, hope that helps.